This video will talk about the channel guns and commanders and the invasion plans. So the relatively short distance, 34 kilometers or 21 miles between the French and English coasts, was to be covered by over 100 super heavy guns. These guns were supposed to prevent British warships in the Channel from attacking the invasion fleet and also provide some fire support for the troops on the beaches. They caused 216 civilian deaths and damaged 10,056 buildings in the Dover area during the war. They also fired on Channel convoys and damaged several ships, although they sank none. This picture shows one of the largest guns, which are 15-inch. So there are a lot of naval guns put into these batteries that were supposed to be put into German battleships that were never built. But there were over 100 guns placed along the coast, and the Germans also planned to place extra ones on the north side of the channel if they had been able to land there. Those would have been 17 centimeter guns. Also, they placed some railway guns near the these emplacements and built shelters for them. Today you can see the remains of one of the most impressive remains is actually the gun control radar installation, which had a huge antenna on top of it that could rotate, and radar direction meant that these guns were a threat at night. And there was one occasion when some British destroyers were found huge gun splashes next to them and had to turn around and head back to England because the hits were so close, although they didn't actually hit them. In addition to long-range guns, the invasion fleet was to be protected by minefields laid across the English Channel on either side of the invasion force. And there was also a diversion called Autumn Wind, using the biggest passenger liners and some light cruisers, which was to depart from Norway, supposedly for the east coast, but would turn back. They would have actually loaded the German troops on board these ships. Whether the British fleet would have caught them is another thing. Because through Ultra, the British probably knew that it was just a feint. And they did have some specialist anti-shipping air crews. They were placed at the eastern end of the channel, being moved from Norway. So let's just compare the commanders. So the British commanders were General Alenbrook, was the CNC in the latter stages of the Sealion invasion scare. And his policy was to delay the invaders at the stop lines and then to launch a counterattack. And the sort of thing that could happen at the counterattack was shown at Arras, which was a complete shambles, although it was only the German gun line that stopped the tanks. Montgomery was actually a subordinate commander at this stage, and his superior was Auchinleck. There were other British commanders who were well known for their defeats, such as Percival, who lost Singapore. He was in command of one of the divisions in the east, that would have been sent to the invasion. And there was Ritchie, who is partly responsible for the Tobruk debacle. And there were others that showed that they were incompetent and were actually removed from command in November or December by Alan as soon as it was apparent that the invasion scare was over. By contrast, the German commanders are really well known for their skill. They included some of the best in the German army, such as Brunstedt, von Manstein, Rommel, Model. They were all going to be involved. And in fact, it might actually have seen a combat between Montgomery and Rommel. The major thing about the invasion fleet is that it was divided into 4 groups, and it would not have been a single invasion fleet, but several that were all heading for different locations and leaving from different ports. So this might have helped the Germans in that respect. And so there wouldn't have been just one target for the British to attack. And it also might have helped confuse the British as to what was going on, because there was constant activity going on all the ports, and they may not have realised immediately that the invasion had begun. The British command structure was a bit confusing, and this may not have helped them because it was geographically based, and exactly who was in command of what at any particular location might not have been that obvious, especially as it comes to the GHQ reserve. So that's why there were these geographical commands. They were also related to training commands, and that's mainly why they were formed this way, because of the ancient way of raising troops in the British Isles, dating back to the 17th century, or maybe even earlier. So here you can see, as I said, that Auchinleck was in command of Southern Command, and that Montgomery was his inferior. And of course we know that these two did not get on very well in the desert. That Montgomery thought he was a better general. And no doubt you haven't heard of any of the other British ones except for Alan Book. Let's have a look at the invasion plans. This is the plan that's usually shown, which was the first German plan. Well, this is actually the second German plan. The first plan was to invade the east coast, and that was before but that was created before the Germans had invaded France. So after that, the army came up with this plan where they were going to transport huge numbers of men across a very wide front, but the Navy just said to them, sorry, we can't do that, we don't have enough shipping, and in any case you wouldn't be able to protect it. So the Navy wanted a plan that crossed the shortest distance and had the smallest amount area to defend. And the army said, well, that's just creating a sausage machine. If we just put them all on a narrow front, it'll be easily defended. So the final plan involved an attack between Folkestone and Brighton, with the other plans being available as a follow-up. This is an American video, film rather, which shows the basic features of the invasion plan. So, importantly, the use of aircraft to pave the way for the invasion by sinking the ships and destroying the fortifications, and also stopping the electricity supply to the southeast of England and cutting the railway lines to the southeast of England, and also the use of paratroops, although the British didn't know that there was only one paratroop division available at the time, and even that had suffered losses in the previous months. And so it was only going to drop in one location, but they thought it was going to drop everywhere. And this map is totally inaccurate, because what they wanted to do was actually advance to a particular point and then stop and defend while they brought over the next wave of troops, and then advance again and surround London, not necessarily attack London. So you can see here how the first German line was between Deal and Brighton. The initial plans had a landing beach called Landing Beach A, which went to Deal, but they cancelled that because there were guns all along the coast, and the German ships would have to sail along the coast to get to Deal. And as I've mentioned before, there were all infantry divisions in the first wave, because this is how Germans operated. They created a breakthrough using infantry, and then they exploited it with tanks. So they had to get the breakthrough with the infantry, and in this case they used some of their best infantry divisions, as well as a mountain division and 2 Jaeger divisions. And the significance of the mountain divisions and the Jaeger divisions is that they were light infantry divisions, and they were trained to operate without supplies for longer, and also while they were surrounded, and also to operate in difficult terrain, of which there was a fair amount, notably the cliffs. And all of these divisions were very experienced, and some of them have been in 3 campaigns, unlike the British troops, many of which were new recruits, and their training had been to dig fortifications. So, as I said earlier, you've got the different routes for the invasion fleets. Then the establishment of a lodgement, and then advancing to take other ports.